Hello, everyone. Andy Wolverton here at Journeys in Darkness and Light. In my last Growing Up with Movies episode, I talked about the lasting impression that Bonnie and Clyde made on me. Today, I'll discuss another movie, The Poseidon Adventure from 1972. But what makes this movie unique is the fact that I saw it every day at the Town Theater in Forest, Mississippi for a solid week when I was a kid. Now, you may ask, how in the world could this happen? Where were your parents? The answer? In another country. When I was a kid, my dad owned his own independent grocery store. This wasn't a typical mom and pop grocery store, but a fair-sized franchise. He was successful and did so well that one of the Memphis food distributors he bought from began rewarding him and other grocers with vacations abroad. One of the company's rules stipulated that no one under 13 could go on these trips, which left me, a 10-year-old, at home alone. Well, not quite at home and not quite alone. In 1972, while my parents were in Rome, I had to stay with my Aunt Margaret and Uncle Randy, which wasn't too bad. I remember my first night there, actually a Sunday, my Uncle Randy asked me what I wanted to do. I said, go to the movies. He said, okay. So he took me to the town theater, checked to see what time the movie ended, and dropped me off. The Poseidon Adventure had been heavily promoted in theaters and on TV, so I'd seen the trailer many times. This is hell, upside down, the narrator exclaimed. I'd been enthralled by scenes of the gigantic tidal wave engulfing the ship, tables hanging upside down, people hanging onto them by their fingernails, the fallen Christmas tree, everything. But the coolest scene of all featured a close shot of a guy who was clearly holding onto an upside down table. As he lets go, he screams and flails into a gigantic light fixture below, which, when he crashes into it, causes a crazy electrical lightning flash that fills everything on screen. I knew I had to see that. The filmmakers had this 10-year-old right where they wanted me. If the theater had been turned upside down, I wouldn't have looked away from the screen. Part of me was trying to figure out who was likely to survive this catastrophe and who wasn't. Another part of me was terrified yet captivated as these people weaved, crawled, climbed, and swam from one dangerous situation to another, fighting and bickering with each other the whole time. All the while, I was getting to know these characters, loving some and tolerating others, but realizing that none of them were bad people. I didn't really want any of them to die, especially Stella Stevens, who I had a major crush on, but I knew some of them weren't going to make it. I also kept an eye on Eric Shea, since I figured we were about the same age. He's actually 2 years older. I thought he was something of a punk, but I knew that if I had been in his shoes, I'd most likely have been toast early on, since he was such a ship nerd, and I would have had no clue. I kept a closer eye on his sister, played by Pamela Sue Martin. And then there was Gene Hackman. More on him in a moment. Uncle Randy came to pick me up, and I got in his Oldsmobile, just as exhilarated as if I had just climbed out of the USS Poseidon and was being helicoptered to freedom. My uncle asked what I wanted to do tomorrow night. Go see the movie again, I said. So that's what I did the next night, and the next, and the next. When everything was said and done, I saw the Poseidon Adventure at least 5 nights in a row, and probably 6. And I can honestly say I never got tired of it. I'm not sure what kept me going back. Probably the action, the adventure, the drama. Maybe it was the hope that the next time Roddy McDowall was going to make it. Or maybe that I could yell to Gene Hackman that if he swung hard enough from that steam valve wheel, he might just be able to gain enough momentum to jump back and join the others. And what about Gene Hackman's character, Reverend Scott? As a kid, I didn't understand him. I admired his leadership, but felt a little uneasy listening to a preacher use profanity and yelling at God. I didn't really equate his sacrifice at the end of the film with being a Christ-like act until I was older, and then it seemed forced. Years later, the aspect of his character that I did appreciate was Scott's anger at God, questioning why so many people had to die. This was something I didn't understand at the time, but I wished we could have seen more such portrayals of ministers as people struggling with not having all the answers. Far too often we see ministers on TV or film either as naive people who can't see the realities of the world they live in, or those using their clerical trappings as camouflage for habitual, inappropriate behavior. Here, with Scott, we see a minister who appears to have a genuine love and concern for people, yet doesn't fully understand the ways of God, and yet isn't afraid to question him. I haven't seen the film in years, but I'm sure The Poseidon Adventure is not a great film. I have no doubt it's filled with cliches, stereotypes, unbelievable plot twists, and maybe even some cringe-worthy moments. Yet, it taught me that sometimes one viewing just isn't enough for some movies, that you can see different things in subsequent viewings, and that even though you know what's coming next, the emotional impact of those thrills and scares can still be effective. In fact, talking about it makes me want to see it again, maybe even tonight, but probably not tomorrow night as well. And the next night, you get the idea. What movies did you watch over and over? Do you still watch them on a regular basis? I'd love to hear your stories as well. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Growing Up with Movies. We'll do another one soon. Everybody take care.